So instead of throwing them out, you can just melt them down, repurpose them into a new candle. There's so many mosquitoes in this house. Welcome back to another episode of Creation Over Destruction, where we talk all things upcycling and DIY. So in today's episode, we're going to be going through two different projects. One of them is going to be making teacup candles. The other one is going to be creating vintage stained glass bottles. So both of these projects could be used as decor for a wedding or an event, or you could also make them as gifts for people. So this one here is the first project we're going to talk about, and that is teacup candles. For burning, not sipping. So the list of necessary materials for this project is actually pretty small. There's only a few things that you really need to just make the basic teacup candle. However, if you want to get a little creative, add a little flair to your candle, or if you want to personalize it at all, I would probably recommend adding a few other materials to the project. And this can be stuff that you already have around your house. I mean, for example, I used some dried florals. I had an old bracelet making kit laying around, so I just used some beads from there. But let's go through the basics of what you'll need first, and then I'll also include all the little extra accessories that I used for my project. So first up, we obviously have teacups, an important part of this project. You can use one that you already have or grab one from a thrift shop. And then I have just a few tubes of food coloring here. These are just the primary colors. This is if you want to be able to add some color to your wax. Speaking of wax, you're obviously gonna need some used candles. I just used a broken stick and then a bag of misshapen floating candles. And then you'll need a few candle wicks to attach to the bottom of the teacups. And then I just have a bottle of glue to attach those wicks. And then here I'm just laying out an assortment of different materials. I have some dried florals, some dried rose petals, some beads, some charms. Just whatever you feel like kind of throwing in there. I also picked up these little spoons, which are absolutely adorable and I highly recommend. Now they do sell wax melting pots. However, if you don't have one or you don't really feel like picking one up, you can actually just use two pots. One of them is going to be a medium-sized pot, and you're going to put a couple inches of water in there, and then you're going to need a smaller one to put the actual wax in. So step one is going to be boiling the water in that medium-sized pot. For the wax, I would recommend keeping similar colors together. And then once your water is at a rolling boil, you're going to slip those candles into the small pot. And just make sure to not put too many candles in at the same time, especially if your pot is angled down like mine is. You just don't want that wax to spill out. And you just want to give that a good stir every couple minutes. And as they start to melt down, you're going to have to grab the metal ends of the wicks. You can use a pair of tweezers like I am. Just make sure to clean the wax off before it hardens. So while your wax is melting, or you can even do this before if you have good time management, you're going to want to prep your teacups. So you're going to start by attaching your wick. So you're just going to want to put some glue on the bottom of the metal part, and then just attach that to the bottom of the cup. I would highly recommend making sure that your workspace is tidy and ready to go, because once you pour that wax into the teacup, you have a very limited amount of time, which is why I would also recommend just doing a little mock setup for your teacups. That way you can place all the materials that you know that you want to use just within reaching distance. So by this point, your wax should be fully melted and we can start pouring it into the teacup. Now, before we start pouring the wax, I would suggest putting something protective underneath the teacups just to catch any of the excess wax that may drip out. Because as you can see here, it's very easy for that to happen. Now, for holding the wicks in place while the wax dries, we tried a few different methods. So here, the first one, we just use the tweezers to prop it up. Later, we use 2 pencils to hold them. You can also use sticks. I know there's actual like a metal plate that you can put on top that holds the wick as well. Another thing to mention here is if you are going to be adding any color to the wax, you can do this while it's melting in the pot if you're okay with the whole batch of it going that color, or you could add it immediately after you put the wax into the teacup. Ultimately, we ended up deciding to just keep the wax its natural color, as we knew that we were going to be adding colored glitter on top. Which leads me to my next point, which is you can definitely end the project here. You don't have to add accessories or anything else on top. You can just leave it as is with just the candle wax in there. The ones that we are making are definitely more for a decorative purpose. So if you are looking to use it more of an actual candle, I would also suggest looking into adding essential oils for some fragrance. So I'm just setting up my teacup here. I knew that I wanted the spoon to look fully submerged into the wax. So as soon as I had that wick set up, I placed the spoon into the wax so that it could harden around it. I also knew that I wanted most of the floral pieces that I was going to be using to look submerged as well. So after a few minutes, I popped the longer pieces into the wax so it could start hardening around it. I actually ended up just using the pencils to prop it up against the side there. So as I waited for the wax to harden a little bit more, I just started going through all the dried florals, trimming them up a little bit, just making sure that all the pieces were the right size. And then my dear friend Lauren was actually in the final stages of hers, just adding the little extra touches. Obviously, because she started before I did, her wax had already pretty much hardened at this point. Now I'm going to offer a few little tips here. The first one is blowing on it will not make it cure faster. And the second piece of advice is always ensure that your lid for your glitter is on. And then here, I'm just finishing up the top layer. So as you can see, the wax has dried enough for me to start putting the stuff on top. If you have something that's going to be quite heavy, like a crystal or anything like that, I would suggest waiting a little bit longer, as long as you don't need it to be a little submerged into the wax. And one more final tip, the end of a pencil works great to pat down any loose glitter or any small charms that you just don't want to get disrupted when moving the candle. One more thing to consider if you are going to be giving this as a gift or if it's going to be used as decor, I would consider gluing the actual teacup down to the saucer. That way it's just one unit and you don't have to worry about them getting separated or the teacup getting knocked over. It would just add a little bit more stability to it. And now we're just going to add our final touches. And then this is the end result. We are super pleased with how they turned out. Our goal was to make each one a little bit different. Both of us kind of had an idea beforehand as to how we wanted to execute them. I would highly, highly recommend going in with a plan. And that is, of course, if you're going to be adding any type of accessories on top. If you're just doing the candle wax, you don't really have to worry about that. But if you do plan on submerging anything into the wax, I would have that all planned out beforehand, because once that starts to harden, you have a pretty small window as to when you can move things within it. So yeah, all in all, we really enjoyed doing this project. I think it would be perfect for a gift or also just table decor for a wedding or an event. And if you decide to try it out, I hope you'd enjoy as much as we did. So now we're going to jump into our next project, which is these vintage stained glass jars. And we'll begin by just going over a list of materials that you're going to need for this project. All right, so the first thing you're going to need is a couple glass bottles or jars. I found a couple pretty unique looking ones. I think the funkier the shape, the better. And then I just have some food coloring in the primary colors. You're going to want to use a product that is a glue and a sealer all in one, and then just grab some plastic containers to put the mixture in, and then lastly just a surface to place the glass jars down on. So we'll get started by creating some of the different color mixtures. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a couple spoonfuls of the glue. You'll want to add just a little bit of water just to thin the mixture out. Don't add too much though, you still want it to be thick enough to coat the jar. Next up, we'll add the colorant to the mixture. I would suggest about 10 drops or so. It'll really depend on how vivid you want the color though. And then you'll just want to go ahead and give that a good mix. And then you'll just pour the mixture into the glass jar. I found the best method to fully coat the inside is just tilting it on the side like I'm doing here, and just slowly kind of bringing the mixture up towards the top. And then once the mixture reaches the top of the jar, just slowly start pouring it back out into the container. I did find I had to repeat that process quite a few times to get it to fully coat the inside. This is why you don't want to water down your mixture too much, because you still want it to be able to stick to the inside of the glass. And then you can start doing the other mixtures for your different colors. And then you'll just use the same process for those. The only difference is going to be how much of the mixture you need. Obviously, if you have a larger jar, you're probably going to need more mixture. But other than that, the process is going to be the same. And I do have a little suggestion here, because you know I love giving out tips. I actually ended up redoing one of them later. Unfortunately, I didn't film it, but I did add glitter to the mixture. And I really did like the results. So if you have any extra glitter laying around, that's another little tip for you. And here's one final thing to note. If you have a wire baking rack that you don't mind sacrificing for this project, I'd recommend using that and then placing the jars directly on the wire rack. That way they don't stick to the cardboard. Here I just have them drying upside down, so any excess paint that's still left in can drip out. So you're going to want to let them sit until they're completely dry. And then once they're dry, you're going to set your oven to 200 degrees. And then once it's preheated, you're going to want to put your jars right side up on a baking sheet, and then you'll leave them in the oven for about 40 minutes to an hour. And this is the final result. So here they are just as is with nothing added to them. I personally like how the mint and the purple one turned out. I like the intensity of the color. And then here they are with some little decorations in them. So yeah, all in all, very happy with this project. I think they'd be great for table decor for a wedding if you've got that vintage vibe going on. And it's a great way to reuse old wine bottles or pasta jars, give them a new life. Well, that is a wrap for those two projects. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial and that you have fun creating as well.